What's up, everybody? It's Josh. Mandalorian Season 1 finale just dropped on Disney+. It is fan-freaking-tastic. It's a great ending that closes up a lot of the threads and storylines from Season 1 and sets up amazing stuff to look forward to in future seasons. I wanted to explain the ins and outs of this ending, including that very last shot, which has mind-blowing implications. So I guess the beginning of the ending, or at least the first story arc that is closed, is the Mandalorian himself. We get more information about his backstory, including his name, which is Din Djarin. We learned that Moff Gideon was in charge of the Great Purge, and we learned that the last time that Din Djarin had heard his name was then. We get an extended flashback sequence that tells the full backstory of the Mandalorian, the sequence that we had seen teased throughout the show. This is on the Mandalorian's home planet, or Din Djarin's first planet that he was born on. And of course, we see the separatist battle droids coming in there, destroying everybody. His parents go to hide him in some kind of a cellar sort of thing, and they are eliminated. And then a battle droid opens up that door. Now, we've seen this scene before. A lot of us speculated that we thought Obi-Wan Kenobi was going to bring out his lightsaber, cut off the battle droid's hand, and he would be the one to save a young Din Djarin. But it is instead a bunch of Mandalorians. And even though I would have loved a little bit of Obi-Wan or Ahsoka or even Anakin Skywalker, it does make sense that it was the Mandalorians that saved Din Djarin, and this is, of course, where he is adopted into their culture as a foundling. We understand now specifically, and it's totally spelled out, that Mandalorian is not a race. Mandalorian is a creed. And although many of the super nerds out there sort of already put this together, the idea of a foundling, some of the context that we got before kind of made it seem like he was adopted into the Mandalorian culture. We now have that completely and explicitly spelled out. Another big story thread that is tied up in this episode is seeing the Mandalorian's face. Now, this happens in a scene with IG-11, and there's also sort of an ending to that arc as well, where the Mandalorian has this distrust of all the droids. Specifically, he distrusts IG-11, but of course, IG-11 was reprogrammed by Kuiil, and there's some connection there, and basically, it comes to a point where the Mandalorian allows IG-11 to take his mask off in order to heal him, and thus two story threads are kind of tied up at the same time. The Mandalorian sort of gets over his thing with IG-11 and trusts him completely. I mean, he trusts him more than anyone else. He lets him see his face, and then we do see the face of Din Djarin. And I don't know about you guys, but when I saw the face of Din Djarin, it was a lot like the effect I had when I saw Kylo Ren, where you're expecting maybe this more grizzled, more badass dude, and not to say that he looks weak or anything like that, but he kind of just looks kind of nice. He looks like a nice dude. You can kind of see where all of these little things throughout the show are kind of hinting that maybe he's not the worst guy. He's a nice guy. Well, he takes off the helmet and he frankly looks like a nice guy. And I really like how this whole thing ended with IG-11 sort of being this continuation of the Kuiil character. Because Kuiil had sort of imprinted himself upon IG-11, the Mandalorian was kind of more able to get over his distrust of droids and trust this droid specifically because he trusted Kuiil. And IG-11 has a really good arc where he ends it by sacrificing himself to allow our heroes, including Din Djarin and Baby Yoda, Cara Dune and Greef Karga, to survive. All of those storylines were wrapped up very nicely. But before that sacrifice, we actually see the consequences of Episode 3, and we see the consequences of Din Djarin deciding to save Baby Yoda. He goes against the Guild Code, he attracts a lot of heat from the Empire, and then, of course, the Mandalorians come out of their hiding to help save him. Now, a lot of us thought, okay, well, they're going to just relocate, or they're all going to get off-world, and we find out that that's not true. Actually, the majority of them were killed. Now, the female clan leader, Blacksmith, is actually still alive, and she's there to explain what happened, and she tells us that, yeah, it was the Empire that came back in after, Episode 3 and what happened there, and she then sees that this is the child, right? The child that it was all for. And when the Mandalorian explains more to the clan leader about the child and the powers that Baby Yoda has, the clan leader explains that she has heard of such things, and she references the ancient Jedi and Mandalorian wars. She also gives Din Djarin his next mission, which is to literally take this baby back to either his people or to some Jedi. He gets his sigil, which makes him the clan of two, he and Baby Yoda. It is, of course, the sigil of the Mudhorn. It's a very nice closing to that whole arc, and really what it sets up is that not only does Din Djarin sort of have this affinity for Baby Yoda, but literally now he is mandated in the Mandalorian code that this is his foundling. He has to take care of this thing as though it is his child until it is of age or until they can find some Jedi or Yoda's people to give Baby Yoda back to. And that was really cool because there's this whole idea of like, oh, are the Jedi enemy? And the Mandalorian clan leader says, yes, but this one is not. And this is interesting. And it also ties into what we see at the very end of the show, which I liked quite a bit, but basically it just sets us up for, holy cow, like it is the clan of two. This is the Mudhorn clan, Baby Yoda and Din Djarin. So fast forwarding back to the sacrifice that IG-11 makes, after that we see the kind of climactic end to the show where our heroes are attacked by Moff Gideon in his TIE fighter. Now this scene is really awesome, and the Mandalorian uses the jetpack that he was given actually by the clan leader before they leave her, and he literally flies into the air and pulls some Mission Impossible type stuff off. It is very cool, and he crashes Moff Gideon's TIE fighter, and then there's a resolution with all of our characters. Greef Karga and Cara Dune decide to remain on Navarro. They're going to make sure no Imperials come back, and Greef Karga is going to rebuild his part of the guild. Din and Baby Yoda say goodbye to them. They go to Barry Quill, and then they head off-world. And again, they are on their mission, which we will see take place in Season 2, to help find this Baby Yoda, either some Jedi people to hang out with and take care of him, or some of his own species. Then, at the very end of the show, we get one of those very sweet end cap scenes that just gives you a lot to think about, sort of like a cliffhanger that makes you desperately want to see what happens in Season 2. And what we see is the crashed TIE fighter of Moff Gideon being ransacked or scrapped by the Jawas. Then we hear the ignition of a lightsaber, and we see the Dark Saber begin to cut through the exterior of the TIE fighter. Moff Gideon emerges holding the Dark Saber, which looks and sounds just like it did in the Clone Wars and Rebels TV shows, and he stands atop his crashed TIE fighter holding the Dark Saber, looking amazingly menacing and badass. Now, we've got to deep dive into this because you might not know what a big deal this is, but the Dark Saber is an incredibly big deal. This is a lightsaber, and it's actually ancient, and it was crafted by the very first Mandalorian Jedi. And yes, there was a Mandalorian Jedi. And the history between Mandalore and the Jedi Order is very interesting. The Darksaber is also a symbol of power, and it is said that whoever wields the Darksaber on Mandalore will literally be the ruler of all of the different clans of Mandalore. It's something like the Sword and the Stone. Like whoever pulls that out, that's the person they're all going to follow, and it's the same thing with the Darksaber. Now, the last time we see the Darksaber is in the hands of Sabine Wren, who actually gives it to Bo-Katan at the end of Star Wars Rebels, and she is said to become the new ruler of Mandalore. Now, what this likely means is that the Great Purge, which we hear referenced many times in the show, and we now find out that Moff Gideon was in charge of, that event likely took place after the end and epilogue of Star Wars Rebels, which would actually place it in the timeline after the Battle of Endor. So what the Great Purge was likely something that happened when the Imperial Remnant decided that they needed to just completely strip mine all of the Beskar from the Mandalorian planet in order to have it to try to survive against the now winning rebellion. Which means that this was likely taken from Bo-Katan by Moff Gideon after Sabine Wren had left with Ahsoka Tano to go find Ezra Bridger. And if you don't know any of things that I'm talking about when I'm talking about that stuff, just go watch the end of Rebels. Very good show and sets up a lot of the Star Wars lore. And so the fact that we get mentions of the Jedi-Mandalorian War, the fact that the Darksaber makes an appearance, the fact that Baby Yoda is Force-sensitive, and Din Djarin is now trying to find other Jedi, sets us up for, like, mind-blowing possibilities in Season 2 and beyond. Now, I do want to do a video that just reviews Season 1 completely, so look for that coming out soon. And also, tomorrow, Saturday, December 28th at noon Eastern Standard Time, I want to do a live stream just talking spoilers with you guys about Season 1. We'll sort of recap what's going on with Season 1, where we think Season 2 is going, and just do a Q&A. So make sure you come back for that tomorrow at noon. But of course, let me know your thoughts about the show and your thoughts about the ending in the comment section of this video. Now let's shout out Taylor Hughes in indeed, Kylo Ren is on Mustafar at the very beginning of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. So shout out to you, Taylor. And now let's do another nerd card question before we get out of here. I want to know, what was the name of that very first Mandalorian Jedi that forged the Dark Saber? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.